look, 68% of voters just looked at a plan to tax everything you own and said yes. It's already being called an organized seizure of private property. Taxation by confiscation. And every home in America is quietly being added to the list. Here's what nobody's connecting. Massachusetts already taxes its millionaires extra. Washington now does too. California's got it planned for the November ballot, and more states are lining up behind them. Different states, different names, same 3 words underneath every one of them. Tax the rich. So here's the thing. I think we're being lied to about who the rich really is. You see, if this was showing up in just one place, you'd write it off, local politics gone weird. But the same idea in 3 places at once, wearing 3 different names, there's a theory about that. When something keeps surfacing in different spots under different labels, you're not looking at coincidence. You're looking at a pattern of deception, misdirection. So I'm going to show you what I'm seeing here, and then you tell me if I'm stretching here. And it begins with an old Arabian fable about a man, a tent, and a freezing desert night. The man's camel is outside in the howling wind, and it says, "Master, please, it's freezing. Just let me put my nose in the tent, just my nose." And it's a tiny ask. Who says no to a cold camel's nose? You'd be a monster to let that camel's nose freeze. So he says, fine. A few minutes later, "Master, my head's cold too, just my head. Can I bring my head into the tent?" It's a logical, rational request. He allows it. Then the neck, then the front legs. Every step a small, perfectly reasonable next ask, until the man wakes up shivering in the dark, having been pushed out of his tent, staring at an entire camel asleep in his bed. The camel took over the tent, 1 reasonable inch at a time. Now you're not the camel in the story, you're the man in the tent. The camel is the tax the rich movement. And last week, the nose just nudged its way in. Now, if you think the government would never let a tax built for the rich slide down the ladder onto regular people, you're ignoring all of American history. The camel has run this exact play twice and won both times. 1913, the federal income tax, pitched to the public as a tax on the robber barons, the richest sliver of the country. Regular workers will never pay this, they promised. So the people allowed the camel's nose into the tent. Fast forward to today, the camel lives in the tent full time as it rips income tax out of every paycheck in America. Which means never, in government speak, has about the same shelf life as a lukewarm carton of milk left on a dashboard in mid-July. 1969, the alternative minimum tax. It got kicked off by a report that 155 of the richest households in the country had hired lawyers good enough to get their tax bills down to 0. So, Congress built a surgical strike, a tax for exactly those 155 untouchables. Again, the people allowed the camel's nose into the tent. But nobody adjusted this tax for inflation, and it just crept. Like a horror movie monster, except instead of killing teenagers, it killed your ability to afford braces for your kids. By the 2000s, that tax for 155 rich guys was breathing down the neck of school teachers and plumbers and 2-income families in normal houses. The camel moved in. And so today, we're looking at another camel asking to get out of the cold. The camel goes by the name of tax the rich. And the nose is moving its way in by the name of billionaire tax. And the head is right behind under the guise of unrealized gains. And sit with that word a second, unrealized, meaning it hasn't happened. It's potential, not actual. They want to tax the transaction before the transaction exists, which is structurally identical to writing a speeding ticket for a sedan that's still sitting inside the dealership showroom with an empty gas tank. Here's what it actually means. You own something. It goes up in value on paper, and they tax you on the increase before you ever sell it, before you see $1. Sound familiar? It should. This is your property tax reassessment. You have been paying a tax on unrealized gains for years. You just never heard a politician call it that. But politicians are getting more comfortable with the term. Illinois already took a swing. Last fall, Democrats there tried to rush a first-in-the-nation tax on realized gains through in a 2-day session. 4.95% a year on anyone worth over $1 billion. It moved so fast, even Illinois' own billionaire governor hit the brakes. Said nobody even knew how you'd collect it. It died before it reached his desk. But a camel doesn't quit because one tent said no. It just walks to the next one. California has their Billionaire Tax Act that just officially made the ballot for this November. You see, this is how the camel tries to get its head in next, by dressing it up. Extremely high wealth in Illinois. Just a few billionaires in California. And this is the move. National polling on a billionaire tax sits at 68%. It's one of the most popular economic ideas in the entire country right now. Half of the Republicans are even on board. They're all kind of comfortable with the camel moving in. But I know what you're probably thinking. This sounds like a billionaire problem, right? Sounds like it's got nothing to do with you. Well, hold that thought, because you'll want to read the fine print in California's version. It amends the state constitution. The Wall Street Journal flagged that the wording lets the legislature widen who qualifies down the road without needing your permission. The door only swings one way. Easier to grow, not to shrink. That's how the camel gets its head in, and potentially the rest of his body very easily. You vote once, and then they just adjust the rest later. And that's the play. Each step reasonable. Each one aimed at someone richer than you, until the label slides down the ladder like a drunk guy on a water slide. And rich quietly comes to mean owns a 3-bedroom that went up on Zillow. Give us $8,000. They change the terminology, adjust the metrics, squeeze the middle, and expect you to thank them for the privilege of paying a heavier bill on a profit you never saw. And if you live in LA, San Francisco, New York, that's already you today. Because in those cities, you can't touch a 3-bedroom unless you're in the top 10% of earners. And the top 10% starts around $200,000 a year. $200,000 in LA, that's not rich. That's broke. That's the rich they're coming for though. But none of that is the part you should actually be worrying about, because it gets worse. What this is all really about is who sent the camel to your tent in the first place. Now, this is the part I can't necessarily prove, but it doesn't take a genius or an official report to see what's going on here. I mean, a simple conclusion to this whole thing would be, all right, so they're coming for the billionaires, then the millionaires, and then you, because government's greedy, right? True. They proved it in 1913 and again in 1969. That's the easy story. We could be done right now. But what makes this one different and worse is who's holding the pen this time. In the words of Silicon Valley VC David Friedberg, it's an organized seizure of private property. Now, the people pushing this, they're going to tell you it's about fairness, making sure that the rich finally pay their fair share. Yet, what they fail to ever mention is that the top 10% of income earners already pays 70% of all the federal income tax in this country. That's not dodging a fair share, that's carrying an unfair one. But fairness was never really the point, because the people stepping into real power don't think unrealized gains goes far enough. They don't think you should own anything at all, including your home. And I'm not doing a bit here. I mean, they wrote it down, they said it out loud, and they're winning elections. Start at the top. The mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, ran on 3 words: tax the rich. During his political rise, he faced heavy scrutiny for direct comments captured in a resurfaced 2020 podcast video. In the clip, Mamdani argued that ensuring universal housing was the ultimate goal, stating, if there was any system that could guarantee each person housing, whether you call it the abolition of private property or you call it a statewide housing guarantee, it's preferable to what is going on right now. His solution to housing affordability is to abolish private property or a statewide housing guarantee. 2 different names for the same door. He'll let you pick the friendlier label. And then, Sia Weaver, director of the Office to Protect Tenants, appointed by Mamdani, once tweeted, private property, including and kind of especially home ownership, is a weapon of white supremacy masquerading as wealth-building public policy. Other uncovered posts from her account called to seize private property and treat it as a collective good. And then, Daria Liza Avila Chevalier, a Democratic candidate who ran for Congress in New York's 13th Congressional District. Another, backed by Mamdani, had deleted her previous Twitter account containing thousands of past posts and reposts expressing support for seizing private property, nationalizing major industries, and abolishing the police, prisons, and borders. Now, they've all since walked back their comments once they discovered they weren't that popular, but none of them necessarily said they were wrong. I mean, one deleted the account, the other called it a gotcha moment, and the other regretted the tone. Different dodges, same tell. Nobody recanted the idea. There's been no change of heart here. Just notes to self to use a quieter voice next time you advocate for rewriting private property rights. There's a canyon between I was wrong and I wish I'd said that where you couldn't hear me. Now, if this was really just about Mamdani and his democratic socialist cronies taking over New York, my theory here would be thin. But this isn't about one man in one city. Seattle elected its own democratic socialist mayor last fall, sworn in back in January. Washington, D.C. just did it, picked one in the primary 2 weeks ago, in a town so blue that the primary is the election. And Los Angeles is doing it right now. Their candidates in a runoff this November against the sitting mayor. So New York, Seattle, D.C., L.A., same movement. The DSA, which went from a few thousand people to over 100,000 in about a decade. 4 of the biggest cities in America, same year. And as of just a few days ago, someone just stepped in to take the whole thing national. And I'll get to him in a second. But I'm not telling you that they're all conspiring in a back room together. They don't need a back room. It's the same idea winning in 4 cities at once, out loud, on a stage, with a victory speech and a press release. That's not a conspiracy. A conspiracy is a secret. This is a movement, and it's keeping no secrets about what it believes. And I don't use the word movement lightly. The pool these politicians are fishing in is young, and it's growing every single year. The Cato Institute, a libertarian outfit, not exactly a socialist front group, found that 62% of Americans under 30 have a favorable view of socialism. Mamdani won voters under 30 by 57 points. The DSA has grown from a few thousand people to over 100,000, almost entirely on the backs of 20 and 30-somethings. Now, in fairness, when most of these kids say socialism, they don't mean abolish your house socialism. They mean rent's too high, healthcare's broken, the deck feels stacked against them. I get it. I'm not calling your nephew a Bolshevik. But here's the 2 parts you can't wave away. First, it doesn't matter what the kids think socialism is. It's what the people they'll vote for think it is. And second, we've got this camel nudging its nose under the tent with nearly 50 million Gen Z voters eligible in 2026, pushing that camel from behind. 50 million. And that number climbs every year, while the people who'd vote the other way get fewer. So a politician who wins by promising to tax the rich isn't the last of a dying breed. He's the test run. Some are in power, and many others are about to be. But this all stopped being theory the second they got their hands on a real lever. Last week, in New York, an appointed board, not elected, appointed, just froze the rent on roughly 1 million apartments by using absolute authority without any democratic process, voting, or legislative approval. They didn't lower anybody's costs either. They just decided what a private owner is allowed to charge for the thing the owner owns, while the owner's insurance and fuel and taxes keep climbing. Now, these are apartment buildings, not your house, and I'm not gonna blur that line, but sit with the move. A government body decided, by appointment, not election, what a private owner is allowed to do with private property. No legislature, no vote. It's administrative overreach dressed up as public safety, run entirely by career bureaucrats who have never risked a single dime of their own capital, but demand absolute sovereignty over yours. That's not a slippery slope you're standing at the top of. That's the camel's front legs making their way inside the tent. Which brings us to the man who wants to run the whole country, Gavin Newsom. For a year, he's been the name at the top of the 2028 list, the Democratic frontrunner. But the shine's come off lately. Bad press, a book tour that went viral for all the wrong reasons, his own party getting nervous. Axios talked to 20 Democratic operatives who called him the guy to beat, and a guy with, quote, a lot of personal baggage. Too many fleas on this dog, they say. And when your life's dream starts slipping, drastic times, they call for drastic measures, like suddenly falling in love with an idea you were fighting just a week ago. And that's the part I need you to catch. This anti-ownership movement isn't just creeping anymore. It's actively winning. And a man this desperate doesn't bet his last chips on a fringe idea. He bets them on the surest thing in the room. Newsom looked at how the DSA swept their primaries last week, looked at his own dying odds, and then decided that taxing what people own wasn't the risk anymore. It was the life raft. The play so popular, it might be the only thing left that can save his shot at the White House. Because here's the tell. This is a man who opposes the billionaire tax in his own state, says it'll just chase the rich to Texas. And last week, he took it national instead. He explicitly declared, It's time for a national billionaires tax and a new social contract. His words, "You may not be able to pick up and move to Texas or Florida to shelter your income from taxation, but I promise you that billionaires can and do. Wealth is movable, and it shops for the state with the lowest taxes." Now, think about the staggering logical gymnastics required to execute that thought process. And it's what makes the mindset behind the DSA so dangerous and scary. He looks at a tax policy, explicitly acknowledges that it is so profoundly punitive that it causes human beings to pack up their entire lives and flee. And his conclusion isn't, wow, maybe this tax idea is fundamentally flawed. No, his conclusion is, and I quote, "The fight to make the wealthiest Americans pay more is not one we should be fighting state by state." Sit with that. The flaw in taxing what people own one state at a time is that people can leave. His fix isn't to stop, it's to make sure that there's nowhere left to run. Diabolical, really. The rent freeze was the front legs. This is the camel lunging for the whole tent. And the man who wants to be president wants to hold the flap open. And here's the tremendous irony. Democrats and Republicans are showing signs of unity against this movement. That's cats and dogs teaming up. You see, the homeowner who votes red and the homeowner who votes blue are in the exact same boat. This isn't Democrats versus Republicans. The DSA doesn't even identify as Democrats. They don't like the Democrats. They've openly admitted that they're using the Democrats just for access to the ballots. They know a third party has no chance in this country, so they're hijacking one that does. This is a movement coming for a regular person's right to own anything. So, what can we do about this? I mean, I wish I could give you a document to file or a website to visit like I normally do to help you protect yourself. But as I see it, the truth is, once the camel gets in the tent, there's no easy move to get it out. The move is really about not letting the camel in the first place, which means every ounce of your power right now is in keeping that nose out of the tent, regardless of how sweet of a story the camel tells you. The whole thing only works because every step looks reasonable. Just the billionaires, just the millionaires, just one little rent freeze, just the nose. Nobody ever walks up and nobody's going to just walk up and ask for your house. No, they're going to ask you to nod at the next small reasonable inch. So the only move there is to stop nodding. The next time something rolls up wearing a just the rich costume, you remember the camel and you keep the nose out at the ballot box, at the dinner table, and how you talk about this with the people you love. Don't let the nose in, or stand out in the cold later. That's the whole choice. Send this to somebody who needs to see it. God loves you, and so do I. Take care.